Hey, I'm Philip, and my math teacher, Mr. Lincoln, constantly made fun of me. He said I was an entitled and arrogant athlete who didn't care about school. But I think that Mr. Lincoln was just evil. Because whenever I got a bad grade, he would show my exam to the class and say, "Listen up, kids. Philip got another D minus. If you want to become a failure in life, just follow Philip's example." You can imagine how much I hated him. But this time, he had taken it too far. When he gave me my math exam back, he had put a huge F on the front page. And to make things worse, he had stapled a McDonald's application form to the back of it. I was so sick of him. Why did he keep telling me I would be a failure? I remember one time when he asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up. When I told him I wanted to become a software developer, he just started grinning and said, "Not in a million years." I thought about telling my principal about Mr. Lincoln's behavior, but I didn't think he would believe me. So instead, I decided to take revenge. It took me a long time to come up with a perfect idea, but the moment I thought of it, I knew it was perfect. I found an online shop that sold bedbugs. Bedbugs are these tiny insects that are active at night and feed by sucking blood. Once your home is infested, it's almost impossible to get rid of them. However, it's not easy to buy bedbugs. You either have to be a pest control professional or own a special dog trained to smell bedbugs. But then I realized how easy it was to fake the needed documents. All I needed was Photoshop and a few hours of practice. Once I had the fake documents, I was able to order a few hundred bedbugs. I used my dad's credit card to buy them, but I figured he wouldn't notice. A couple days later, the bugs arrived. As soon as I had them, every day I dropped a few into Mr. Lincoln's bag. I hoped they would crawl out when he was at home, so they would infest his apartment and suck his blood while he slept. He totally deserved it, even though I didn't know if my plan was actually working. But then my dad's credit card bill arrived. He asked why I'd spend $50 on bed bugs. I told him I needed them for a biology project, but my dad called my biology teacher and found out I was lying. My dad absolutely hates liars. He went nuts and lectured me for hours, wanting to know the real reason I had ordered those bugs. In the end, I told him about Mr. Lincoln picking on me and my plan to take revenge on him. I thought my dad would understand, but he didn't. He marched me down to my school and forced me to apologize to Mr. Lincoln. When my math teacher heard what I had done, he totally lost it. I had never seen him so mad. And he also said that it explained why he had so many weird, itchy marks on his legs. So my plan had worked. Kinda. I just didn't think about what would happen if I got caught. The next day, I had to go to the principal's office instead of class. Mr. Lincoln and my principal were already waiting for me. When he told me I was suspended, a big grin appeared on Mr. Lincoln's face. I tried to explain to my principal how Mr. Lincoln had been picking on me for years, and that he had even stapled a McDonald's application to the back of my exam. But of course, Mr. Lincoln denied my accusations and said he would never do something like that to one of his students. And my stupid principal took his side because, according to him, Mr. Lincoln is the best math teacher that ever worked in his school. Well, now I have to change schools and repeat the year. But the worst thing was seeing that dirty smile on Mr. Lincoln's face. He was so smug, and when I left the school building, he followed me out, smiling and waving at me. I was so freaking mad. I wanted to do something even worse to him. But this time, I had learned my lesson, and I knew that taking revenge would only get me into bigger trouble. I guess that most of the time, there are better ways to resolve conflict than revenge. As Gandhi said, an eye for an eye, and the whole world goes blind. Thanks for listening to my story, and please don't forget to subscribe to this channel.
Hey, I'm Laureen, and my mom always made me feel like I was a big disappointment. She wanted me to be a straight A student, but no matter how hard I studied, I rarely even got a B minus. My worst subject was math. It didn't make any sense to me, and my math teacher Mrs. Blacksmith didn't even try to help me figure it out. Instead, she'd make fun of me for being stupid. If I asked a question, she would say things like, "Oh wow, Lorene doesn't get it again. Okay, let's all go extra slow for Lorene. 1 plus 1 is 2. You understand it now, Lorene? Or do you want to waste more of our time?" I don't know why she hated me. I mean, I never disturbed her classes, unlike some of my classmates, because I'm rather quite shy. I guess she thought that I was the perfect victim because I wouldn't stand up for myself, but she was wrong about that. At first, I tried to tell my mom about how Mrs. Blacksmith was picking on me, but my mom said I simply should stop asking stupid questions so I wouldn't annoy my teachers anymore. But one day, Mrs.
Sorry.
I was the perfect victim because I wouldn't stand up for myself, but she was wrong about that. At first, I tried to tell my mom about how Mrs. Blacksmith was picking on me, but my mom said I simply should stop asking stupid questions so I wouldn't annoy my teachers anymore. But one day, Mrs. Blacksmith took it too far. When we got a class photo done, she showed it to the whole class and said, "Lorene, why can't you smile nicely like everyone else? You ruined the whole photo. I can't hang it on the wall with you looking stupid like that." I was close to tears and everyone else was giggling. That's when I decided to tape every class I had with her so I'd have evidence of how she treated me. I started to ask stupid questions on purpose all the time, like, "What's the difference between a triangle and equator again?" And every time I asked her to explain something, she made fun of me. I recorded her for 6 months until I had over 50 recordings of her insulting and embarrassing me. I figured I had more than enough evidence to prove my teacher had been picking on me. So I went to the principal and played him a compilation of Mrs. Blacksmith's worst insults. He looked shocked, but all he said was to come back to his office tomorrow before school to discuss the matter with Mrs. Blacksmith. When I went home, I played my dad the recording and he went nuts, saying, "No one treats my daughter like that." And my dad knows a lot of policemen in our small town, so he asked one of his buddies to support me during the meeting. When I arrived with my parents and a policeman at the principal's office, the principal, Mrs. Blacksmith, and 3 other men from the school authority were already waiting for us. I was so glad I had a policeman to back me up, especially since Mrs. Blacksmith said she was happy we were there to discuss me because I was such a problem student. But then the principal asked me to play the recording. I still remember how Mrs. Blacksmith's expression went from confident to, "I am screwed." Afterwards, the principal turned to Mrs. Blacksmith and asked, "Do you want to say something?" Her face went bright red. She knew there was no excuse for what she'd done. All she said to me was, "I'm sorry for mistreating you, Lorene. It won't happen again." The principal said, "You're right, it won't happen again, because you are fired." Mrs. Blacksmith started crying, but didn't say anything. She knew there was nothing she could do. But it got even better. My dad's policeman friend told her she was under arrest for bullying. It turns out that making fun of someone is a serious offense, even though I'm not sure it was necessary to put her in handcuffs and to escort her outside. However, on her way out of the office, our eyes met for a quick moment, and I couldn't help but smile. Mrs. Blacksmith never came back to our school. And it wasn't long before word spread about what I'd done. It turned out I wasn't the only one she'd been picking on. Suddenly, all kinds of people were coming up to me to thank me for getting rid of her. I even made some friends because of it. If that wasn't crazy enough, a few years later, a friend of mine told me Mrs. Blacksmith was now a private tutor. I guess she's not allowed to teach in public school anymore. I also know that tutors make less money than teachers do. So she got what she deserved, even though I hope she treats her students better now than she treated me. If you should ever have a teacher that picks on you, make sure to record everything they say and make sure to tell your parents and your principal about it. Because sometimes you have to take things into your own hands. Thank you for listening to my story, and please subscribe to this channel. My mom was always good at pretending to be a normal person. She owned a hot dog stand and always had that fake smile on her face. But I knew who she really was. When she came home from work, she'd close all the curtains and make me pray for hours on her hard wooden floor. It was so painful, and my knees would get really sore, but my mom didn't care. She said it was the only way of keeping bad spirits and demons away. As I grew older and got access to the internet, I realized my mom was crazy. And at age 14, I finally got up enough courage to tell her I didn't want to pray anymore. I said I was sick of having bruised knees, and I even told her that spirits and ghosts don't actually exist. But I shouldn't have said that, because suddenly my mom looked at me like I was some kind of stranger. She got one of those huge crystals that she kept for protection and held it up to her eye to look at me through it. "This is bad," she said. "You're full of evil energy. We must pray." I heard enough. I went to my room and locked the door. My mom could be really scary, but what choice did I have anyway? I was too young to leave home, and nobody would care if I told them my mom believed in ghosts. So I knew I was trapped, but I never expected what happened next. That same night, I was woken up by the sound of someone trying to open my door. I thought it might be an intruder, so I asked, "Mom, is that you?" She replied, "Yes, sweetie, it's me. Please open the door. I'm worried about you." I didn't want to let her in, but she was my mom, and that's why I opened the door for her. But then she immediately flew at me, screaming, "You're the devil! Leave my daughter, foul beast!" She was waving a large crucifix around, and I saw that she had sharpened the bottom to a point. Was she trying to stab me? I've never been so scared in my life. But then I picked up my blanket and threw it over my mom, so I had enough time to escape and run outside. Luckily, I ran into a jogger on the street who called the police for me. Shortly after, my mom got arrested. She told them I was possessed and that she was only trying to save my soul by doing an exorcism to chase the devil out of me. Wow, how kind of her. Unfortunately for my mom, the judge saw things differently. He ordered a psychiatric assessment for her, and now she's in a psychiatric ward until she's cured. But I don't think that will ever happen. Just recently, she attacked one of the guards because she thought he was a demon, and now she has to spend most of her time locked up in her room. It's sad because she only gets 1 hour a day to walk outside, and when they do let her out, she's heavily sedated. Recently, I went to see her for the first time. My heart was pounding like crazy, but all she could say was, "Is that you? Is it really you and not the devil?" It was so sad to see her like that. She looked so old, like she'd just been through hell. I couldn't cope. I bursted into tears and left. Luckily, my Aunt Becky was waiting for me outside because after my mom got locked away, my aunt legally adopted me. And it's fair to say that she's the parent I've always dreamed of. Recently, she asked me what I wanted to do with my life, and I told her I wanted to produce horror movies someday. If my mom had heard that, she would have punished me severely. But my aunt is different, and that's why she, instead, bought me a camera so I could start working on my first amateur horror film. It's a bit like Paranormal Activity, just lower quality. So I know I've got to learn a lot, but with my aunt's help, I'm sure I'll get there. Anyways, thank you for listening to my story, and please subscribe to this channel for daily videos.